Thanks, Ron. My opening words, each of us has a Camino, a road of life, the course of life on earth. As John Donahue has written, at its heart, the journey of each life is a pilgrimage through unforeseen sacred places that enlarge and enrich the soul. Ron and I's talk this morning is reflected on Principle 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. This morning, I'm remembering Mary Bacton, a member of our congregation who died much too soon and totally unexpected. And I share my part of the story because Mary has asked me repeatedly to do such a talk. So Mary, we remember you. If her friend Richard Kuhn is listening, good morning. I'm sorry, I called you Richard and it's Edward. If you're with us, good morning. For the benefit of our Zoom guests, we will have a slideshow, as Ron spoke of, rather than doing it it'll be between our talks, but rather than talking a little bit and showing a picture, for the benefit of the Zoom, I will do my talk, Ron will do the slideshow, and then Ron will do his presentation. I've taken some of my historical information from Joyce Rupp's book, Walk in a Relaxed Manner, which is over here on the table. She writes, historical records confirm this ancient pilgrimage has a popular route. By the beginning of the 10th century, during the Middle Ages, up to 1 million people walked this route. And currently, as many as 1,000 set out each day during this busy summer months. This historical route is also known as La Via Lactea in Spanish, the Milky Way, because the direction of the path moves under this galaxy. A similar name is Compostela, from 2 Latin words meaning field of stars. This Camino is a revered walk to the Cathedral of St. James being one of the 12 apostles. It brings us to the city of Santiago in northern Spain, as Ron has shown us on this map. According to legend, the bones of St. James the Apostle was brought to rest. The church was built over this. Legend has it that a shepherd or a hermit hearing some ethereal music followed the stars to a field where he discovered the body of St. James. Excuse me. Ron and I each have our glass. I'm the short one and Ron's the tall one. Traditionally, the scallop shell is worn or put on your backpack, another sign of union with the ancient pilgrim energy. It denotes that the traveler is on a pilgrimage. One popular legend has it that when St. James' followers were carrying his coffin to land from the boat that they were traveling in, they were interrupted and surprised a wedding party. The horse spooked and bolted into the sea. Both the groom and the horse were presumed to have drowned. And a miracle is attributed to St. James because the groom and the horse both survived, coming up out of the sea with many scallop shells attached to the tangles of seaweed clinging to the horse and the rider. Thus, the shell became a key symbol for those who travel this journey to the cathedral. And mine is depicted here on my backpack with that beautiful Spanish cross. Joyce also writes some of the reasons that the people walk the Camino. We all want more. We all want to know that our lives are meaningful and that we have a purpose. And we need our lives to be meaningful. The road to Santiago holds many kinds of ancestral power, including that of adventure, generosity, faith, purpose, companionship, and courage, and allergic reactions. This energy can be missed, of course, if one is not open or aware, but I think it's difficult to miss. Even those who set out on the Camino without any spiritual intention experience moments of awakening on this path. Dorrit and I set out on a beautiful morning. The air was so fresh. Dew was lifting. We were walking towards a faint rainbow with the sound of cowbells in the distance. Closing my eyes, I can hear it and see it. Our first night in Orasan, where over a nice dinner, we shared personal connections with these fellow pilgrims. This was a very meaningful connection, as those fellow peregrinos would appear along the path time and time again. Yet, as much as I am a very relational type of person, I knew that my lesson was to embrace the moment, yet let it go. It's somewhat of an unwritten rule that we don't really share a lot of our emails. So as much as I met some wonderful people along the way, I haven't stayed in touch with them other, of course, than my dear fellow hiker, Dorrit. I personally didn't set out on this pilgrimage on a deeply religious search. Many of my weekly Wednesday hikers had been, and their stories interested me. I was introduced to Dorrit, who had recently been widowed and who wanted to go, but like myself, was hesitant to go alone. Dorrit had a deeper religious need. She was searching for enlightenment, and I just confirmed that with her last week. And she said, yes, please feel free to share this. She asked and was given a blessing by her Anglican priest. And he, not in return, but he did ask her to pray for him. He too was struggling with a life issue. I simply wanted to experience time away from everything, to walk in the footsteps of history, and the opportunity of experiencing and seeing a different culture. There were days when my heart was so light and full of joy that I thought I could fly. And other days, a lot of sorrow that I did not try to suppress. I tried being open to each and every experience. If not now and here, when and where? In our busy lives, this was such a gift to be alone with my own thoughts. Most evenings, I went along with Dorrit to the local church, where the Camino prayer was read in different languages. There was a beauty in ending the long day with strangers, each with our own needs and gifts, gathered in silence, each in our own world. Yet I experienced a profound feeling of togetherness, sacred moments for me on this journey of life together. I think it's how we live, how we respond to life, to what life brings us, that makes the difference in our spiritual journey. I'll never forget a young priest with a good sense of humor teasing those who had forgotten to turn off their cell phones. He said, has God got the right number? And then, of course, we would walk in and we would be looking around at this church, and he'd say, have you just come in to gawk? And he didn't say it in a scolding manner. And also, instead of inviting the participants to come to the front to take the host, he distributed amongst the people. He came down from the front and distributed amongst the people. Personally, we were invited to all participate. I did not feel comfortable doing so, but I still appreciated the fact that he came to the people rather than the people coming up to him. I thought that was a very gracious gesture. Being gathered in spirit was a spiritual experience for me, but I sensed many times the beauty of nature, the swaying prairie grasses. Just close your eyes for a moment as I say this. The beauty of nature, which everyone sees in their own way, the swaying prairie grasses, the wildflowers just beginning to unfold in early April, hearing the call of the cuckoo bird, seeing eagles skimming over rivers, and oh, so many, many bird songs and blooms. If I close my eyes, this all just comes back to me, which I often do when I can't sleep. My friend Dorrit and I met so many wonderful pilgrims from just about every continent. Many days we were cold and wet, and I tend to be cold in the middle of July. So frequently I had to sleep in my clothes because most refugios only have a limited number of blankets, and often I would ask for more than my share if there were extras. But then another day would come and the sun would have broken through and would have forgotten that cold, miserable night. Our first stop in Santiago was to have our credentials certified. And then we're given our certificates, which mine is posted here on the board. I invite you to turn it over because Dorrit, who overheard that Father Lopez, the dean of the cathedral, was also signing certificates. So we were one of the lucky ones to receive both. And Ron himself has his own certificates. And again, his are a little, well, he's got one that's a little different. He's even surpassed my two. Not that we're competitive. Again, luck was with us. Dorrit overheard that the full mass with the enormous Botafumeiro, I think I'm saying it correctly, the incense burner which swings from the rafters, and it's massive. Oh my gosh, if it ever fell. It emits a smoky scent, and that mass was going to be held the following day at 12 noon. So we had the opportunity of experiencing the fullness of that holy rite. The full mass doesn't occur every day. And again, because Dorrit had done her meticulous homework, no sooner had the mass ended that you whisked me off to the back stairs behind the altar, and we viewed the silver coffin of St. James. We chose not to walk to Finisterre. We took a bus, but of course we took in the lighthouse and we walked to the edge of the ocean. That was an overwhelming moment and somewhat of a precarious moment. It's very steep. Ron can speak more and the pictures will emphasize that. In the slideshow, you'll see a picture of a Tibetan monk disembarking a bus in Finisterre, not the same bus that we were on, but I approached, being curious. I wanted to ask some questions, and I was told that they were from Tibet, but there was absolutely no way that I was to ask any questions or come any closer. So at least I was permitted to take a picture. And I have since read there are many people from different religious traditions, and I will go so far as to say holy men that come and walk the Camino. But his garb is really very, very stunning. Ron, you will show the slideshow. Thank you.
Oh, there we are. Okay. Okay. There are many ways to walk the Camino Santiago. This map shows the most common route, the Camino Francis, which both Germaine and I took in 2014. You start in the east, just inside France, at Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and you cross over the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain on the first or second day. So the most difficult and challenging hike is right at the beginning. 800 kilometers, and about a month later, you arrive in Santiago. Some people carry on another 90 kilometers to Finisterre, the end of the world, on the Atlantic Ocean. I should point out that many, if not most people, walk only part of the Camino, often coming back later to carry on from where they left off. A lot of people start from Sarria, 110 kilometers from Santiago. When you approach Santiago on your Camino, you will start seeing more people, perhaps who have left their athletic days behind them, but they're still rising to the challenge. This map shows the Camino Norte, part of which I walked in 2019. It starts in the small city of Irún, in the very northeast corner of Spain, in Basque country. The whole route is a little longer than the Camino Francis, and it's spectacularly beautiful. as it's more mountainous and it has a great view of the ocean, the Bay of Biscay, known as the Bay of Cantabria in Spain. But it still leads to Santiago, close to the Atlantic Ocean.
That's pretty obvious. See the happy smiles? I'll check that out a couple weeks later. But it was a beautiful morning, as I said.
Yeah.
This was again where I said it was, we met in Oris on the very first stop. Although it was only an 8-kilometer hike, it's at the base of the Pyrenees. It was a very long and challenging 8 kilometers. So we had suggested that this was a good spot to stop, and also gave us a wonderful opportunity of meeting our other hikers. I wanted to show this base of the Pyrenees, how luscious everything was in April. And it just takes me right back. This is one of the many symbols that you'll see along the Camino. And I think it's so cute to see a bicyclist over here. And there was many people who do it on bike.
Okay, this is the Fountain of Roland. And this is both the border separating France and Spain. And it's also the site of the famous Song of Roland, the epic 8th century poem of Roland, who defended Charlemagne as he retreated from Spain back into France.
This is just one of our many, many rainy days. We have walked some of the Pyrenees, and this marker is really beautiful. Some of the imagery doesn't show up as well in the picture.
I was more fortunate than Germaine. It was a beautiful sunny day when I passed this spot.
This was very interesting. This is a little hut that has the 2 tables, and they're used as tables, they're used as beds. It's an excellent little refuge. And that particular day, there was a lot of snow on the ground, and Dorrit was carrying a bag with Canada. And I wish I had had the presence of mind to put the Canada bag down on the snow and take a picture. It would have just been perfect.
Okay, I started my first Camino with Tom and Mary, whom many of you know, of course. At the outset, Tom and I were only slightly acquainted with Mary, who had recently started coming to Don Heights. This shows Tom and Wies. Wies is a Dutch artist who was walking the Camino mostly barefoot. Occasionally she wore flip-flops. This is where I got my ego boost from Anne and Daniela, who were German medical graduates. This was thanks to Mary. And this is Wies, the artist, and Renee, the American engineer, when we had dinner in Pamplona. We talked of Unitarianism principles and Michael Servetus, in spite of Tom's protests about proselytizing. And I wonder if we can adjust the projector to be down just a little bit more, because you can't.
And
Okay.
Ron, because we have lots of time, I suggest that you talk more about this. Do you want me to get you the printout that you have?
The which?
The printout that you brought? Do you want to talk more about it?
Oh, okay. Well, it's right there. Yeah. This is a place called Alto del Perdón, which is quite well known. And it's called the Mount of Forgiveness. And it's an amazing sculpture of 10 or 12 different metal sculptures. It was erected in 1996. And it's had a great effect on Camino pilgrims who stay to examine it in detail. There's a document on the table over here that tells you a great deal more about it and what all the symbolism of the various characters are. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that you can really get a good feel from the this, because the slide presentation here isn't showing as much detail. If you look at it on the computer screen, you can really see the detail in it. So if anybody's interested, there's this copy over there.
Rouse, talk about the number of turbines, wind turbines.
Good point. Yeah. The interesting thing is that you can see the turbines in the background, and everywhere you go in Spain, you see turbines all over the place. They're very big on it. Just generally speaking, I think that's true in Europe generally, because I know that the Germans are really pushing wind power as well. Germaine?
Oh, this is that beautiful Romanesque church. We met a young woman from England who was very historically informed. So she was the one who alerted us to this one. I can't remember if she was with us at the time. The octagonal form is modeled on the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. And the interior is totally unadorned, supposedly associated with the King's Templar. And it's out in a vast field with nothing else around it. It was just again a picture perfect day. So we sat on that bench and had some of our lunch there, but it was just, again, one of those magical moments.
Okay, and this is the world map.
Oh, yes. Dort and I, well, we made a wrong turn. We came across this map, but it turns out that Ron also saw it. So maybe we didn't make such a wrong turn, but it was quite amazing. It's this world map cut into the side of the mountain. But I think we were lost as much as we saw the map. We continued on and we didn't see anybody else. We came to a train track and of course tried to flag the train down and they ignored us. But there were some young men working on the train track. So Dort has some Spanish and they had some English. So the supervisor said to this young man, he instructed us to get into his car and he would take us. So as he was driving us, and I think it was he drove us to Lyon, I can't remember exactly. The young man turned and we were both sitting in the back and he said, my mother would think this was rude, again in somewhat broken English, but he said, how old are you? So we told him and he said, are you crazy?
I find I found myself lost on several occasions. All of a sudden, suddenly realizing that you've obviously made a wrong turn and having to go back 2 or 3 kilometers or so. And but it's part of being over there. Whoever puts the signs in does a great job, but there are a few places where there could be a couple more signs. Okay, so northeastern Spain is Basque country, and you don't have to look far to see signs of the Basque people's struggle for independence. Interestingly, the Basque language is what's called isolate, which means that it's the only language. It's not like any other European language. And in fact, Basque is the oldest European language. And you see attractive stone collections like this all over, everywhere you go. There just seems to be an artistic soul in Spain that causes them to put these up. I presume it's the Spanish. I don't think it's the Pilgrims that are doing this.
Andy, I thought of you often, but I particularly thought of you here. It wasn't serving Hungarian wine, but it was serving free red wine. They've continued to do this since 1891, but Ron has more to say about that.
Yeah. This winery was established in 1891 by a Spanish company who have offered free samples to pilgrims and passersby from the beginning. But the property itself was the site of a monastery and an order of monks for centuries before that. And this is Mary and me with Andrew, an American nurse, that we met early on.
Supposed to be sharing this too. This is just a typical monastery where we stayed, and frequently Dorrit and I, because it was so obvious that we were older, we were given privileges, and often they'd say, well, follow me, and they would take us to a place where it was quieter and there weren't quite as many beds. Next slide. This is what a typical sleeping quarters are like. So you can see you don't have much space. If you have someone that snores, well, you either learn to fall asleep with the snoring or else you're awake all night. And sometimes, which happened to me frequently, I was on the upper deck, which I don't mind because I like the upper bunks, but you actually dress and undress lying, sleeping in your bed. And I'll never forget one night in the middle of the night, I had to get up and use the bathroom. And the way I moved my foot, I hurt it on the ladder going down. And it was, of course, I tried not to scream, but anyway, just another one of those memories.
This alberg is another typical municipal alberg. The municipalities promote the idea of doing the Camino for religious reasons largely, but they also want a little bit of money. It's a very little bit of money because this was one of the nicer albergs. It's in a city called Burgos, beautiful city, and €5 per night. And this albergue is in a convent, and it's still operated by the nuns. And we had luxurious single beds. This was a real treat. And the nuns ensured the men and women were kept apart. No hanky-panky. The shell and the arrow are everywhere. This is how you know whether you're on the right track or not. The problem is if you're not on the track, then you can't find it. What's going on here?
This is Tom and Mary.
Okay.
Oh, isn't that beautiful? I thought there was, as Ron said, there's so much beauty along the way, filling those pine cones up, encircling them with the rocks. I thought it was really beautiful. And Dorrit is an artist, so of course she really appreciated those moments.
We met this 10-year-old boy, Spanish boy, and his British mother. He wrote a book of his Camino experience, which I bought on Amazon. An incredibly great kid. I still predict that he will be the president of Spain in 30 years from now. Unfortunately, I lost his book in the course of a fire at our house somehow. I don't know, I can't find it. And I went to look for it on Amazon, and it's not there. So I don't know what's going on. But at any rate, the kid is amazing.
This was just some of the frequent refreshment spots we would see along the way. Sometimes they would ask for a bit of money, other times they were free. I thought it was nice that they had written that the water was not chlorinated. That's a nice little gesture for us. I don't have a picture of it, but it reminds me of one spot that we came into, and she was playing classical music, opera music. It was beautiful. And again, with our broken languages, we communicated. I think if you really want to communicate, you somehow do. You just speak from the heart. There's one other one.
Frequently, on a regular basis, you come into a Spanish town and you'll come across a fountain there. And you can fill up your water bottle or whatever if you want. Occasionally, you'll see a sign that says it's not potable water, most in Spanish, of course. But most of the time, it's great. And I think that's something that, public water supply and public bathrooms, by the way, is something that we need more of. We're getting rid of them all. It doesn't make any sense to me, but however, that's another issue. Okay, this is in Burgos. And this beautiful city, about the size of Kingston, has a magnificent cathedral, which you can see there. It's hard to get a decent picture of it, because and it's a center of archaeological research with the university, the Museum of Human Evolution, and also the location of Atapuerca, which is possibly the most exciting archaeological site in the world. We stayed 2 nights in Burgos. This is a Guardian article, which was just published a little over a week ago, about the discovery of the oldest human remains in Europe 1.4 million years ago at Atapuerca, just outside of Burgos. There's a copy of this article on the table over here if you're interested. Caves and cave art within a few kilometers of the Camino, again, not far from Burgos. Some of the oldest art, over 45,000 years old, has been attributed to Neanderthals. Many researchers now think that Neanderthals are not a different species from sapiens, but merely a different race. Dinner and denial in Burgos. We had a great dinner in Burgos the first night, and not so great the following night, but still pretty good. I guess you can never go back. I commented that evening to Mary and Tom that they seemed to be going closer together. Only the hair of effusive denials, nothing of the sort. A few days later, they wanted me to be the first to know that they were now a couple.
Again, just one of the many refreshment stands. This man was blind, so I think we gave as generously as we possibly could. People said that he continued to replenish that food stand and that jug of water. So it was a nice moment. And there were some little chickens in the backyard. It's really a lovely little spot.
Of course, as you travel along, there are plenty of bars and restaurants and so on along the way that have grown up over the years. The Camino's been there for 1,000 years, so you're not going to run out of refreshments. But there were times when I wondered, why am I doing this? The Iron Cross.
It's the highest point on the Camino, Francis, and it's a practical marker in winter when everything else would be covered. All those other markers that you've seen would be covered in snow. So this points the way. Supposedly the Celts and the Romans used it as a border crossing. St. James erected this cross to commemorate the stone that he threw at a pagan priest who was having a human sacrifice. So pilgrims for centuries have brought small stones in remembrance of St. Francis. And the significance is, as you drop your stone, you're leaving your burdens behind.
The attractive town of Hospital Orbigo was originally settled in the 12th century with a hospital. The term hospital actually means a hostel or accommodation, not a medical establishment. They took the American view of medical and made sure that that was provided privately. But that's I was really quite impressed with that bridge. This spectacular Puente Orbigo, the bridge, was built in the 13th century over a previous Roman bridge. And this Belgian woman had just taken over this albergue in Hospital Orbigo that day. We paid a donativo, or a voluntary offering that day. I think it was 10 euros. And her first dinner was very well received.
Do you see me up there on the stairs? Tell me you see me. I have to tell my brother that that's me because he jokingly thought that I was going to do the Camino on my knees. So I showed him at least I did the stairs or part of them. Anyway, the stairwell, and Tony, you will appreciate this. This stairwell was built from stones. The Mino River had a dam built on it, and it submerged the village, much like happened here in Ontario with when the seaway was built, called the Lost Villages. So religious buildings were rebuilt, but many of the homes were not. But this stairwell was built from one of those churches that was submerged.
Up to Ocebrero, the steepest mountain on the Camino after the Pyrenees. But everywhere on the Camino, you're either going up or you're going down. A lot of people find going down is harder. Let's do this. John, can you advance it? Okay. After a steep climb, I arrived at Ocebrero to find that it was invaded by a German movie group making a movie about, of course, the Camino. John? The fellow next to Mary got a bit part in the movie. Oh, oops, it's working. Ocebrero is a very attractive upscale town with a beautiful but surprisingly modern church.
And next to the church is a museum, and it has all of these Bibles illuminated with a very low lighting. And supposedly there's churches from or Bibles written in every language, including Braille. And it's too bad I didn't include this picture, but I had an oppressive feeling when I was in that town. The buildings, and Ron's picture doesn't show that, they were very short buildings, and they had thatched roofs. And I don't know, it was just a very oppressive feeling. I remember Dort and I sitting on a hilltop, and one of the Australian couples that we had met along the way, she said, "Is something wrong?" I don't know. It was just something very foreboding that I got that feeling in that. But it was quite lovely to go through that museum. And I thought these Bibles were, again, something significant.
This was probably the coldest night of my Camino.
How cold was it?
Just above freezing. The following morning, I did something of a double take before I realized that it was a cloud, not a lake. Ocebrero was actually 1,300 meters, not kilometers, above sea level. And it's the most challenging climb after the Pyrenees.
May I say something, interject?
Sure.
When you talk about the coldest, as I said, I was cold frequently, and there was one night we stepped in a refugio. It really looked like a horse's den, like not a den, but what do you call stables? They were cut out like I really think it might have been stables. It was so cold, and I got so sick the next day. I was just dragging myself. So when we got to the nearest little village, we had no choice but to take a taxi. And I went to bed immediately in this very small hotel. And Dort was so kind. We had sent on our backpacks, which is called mochila. We had learned that you could send them on ahead of time for a small fee. So she walked to the refugio where we had sent our backpacks. She not only carried hers, but carried mine. I was so sick. The next day I was able to walk. And then she had a similar experience where, again, she slept all day, and this lovely Italian woman gave her some medicine, which of course we didn't take, but it was kind of her to give it. but she was sick and we had no choice but to take a taxi to a next little town. But cold and wet, yes. If it, plants usually grow in the rain. Well, I didn't grow any taller.
Okay, here's Ron clowning around again. After Osabrero, I consulted with Mary and Tom, and I decided that I would stake out on my own and give Mary and Tom some time to themselves. It's not uncommon to make way for cattle, and there are lots of horses and sheep as well.
I'm going to interject here again, because I was raised in the farm. This was a natural sight and a natural smell. Dorrit hated it. There were times when we had to walk between the house and the barn with all that the animals leave behind. Oh, she just was a very unhappy camper.
Eucalyptus trees.
Close your eyes and smell the eucalyptus. It was just a forest. And did anyone know that eucalyptus trees grow in Spain? I didn't. Anyway, another magical moment.
This woman, who I saw on several occasions, not only traveled with her dog, but she got her dog to carry her backpack. And at long last, I arrived in Santiago. Germaine saw the same place, but it didn't seem to make a fizz on her.
And didn't it take forever to get into Santiago? You see the
It's incredible. Yeah, just walking in, you just seem to be walking in on a never-ending trek, walking into Santiago. It just never ends. But finally, this is the Seminario Minor, and I stayed in this great albergue, formerly a seminary for training priests. And it was about a kilometer from the center of Santiago. I even got a private room, but it was a strenuous hike up the hill, which is the way it is everywhere in Spain. Here's a bird's eye view of Santiago from the seminary. And certificates.
Guess who that is? And you have quite a long wait before you get your certificate because there's a lot of other people. Unlike Ron, we sat in bleachers, and actually, often when I'm waiting for something, I close my eyes in a meditative moment, and Dorrit had to keep reminding me, hey, time to move on, time to move on. So here we are.
I was surprised to see this fellow playing his bagpipes. They're very different from the ones from the Scottish ones they normally deal with. Galicia was settled by the Celts long before they made their way further north. Santiago Cathedral is, of course, a major attraction for many, if not most, peregrinos. And here are two more views of the cathedral, which is really difficult to see in its entirety. And here are two views of the famous Botafumero, or huge incense burner, which is slung on a long cable during the special ceremonies for pilgrims.
Yeah, other than to say that it was, you got to see the incense burner also? Okay, because we were told that it happens only occasionally, but it made it more special for us. And as everybody probably knows, originally the incense was to rid the smell of the unwashed bodies, and perhaps all of that accompanies with, that's supposedly the legend of it. Going back to the certificate, you'll see my name is written not as I would write it, but the young man said, oh, I wrote it in Latin. Would you like me to correct it? And I said, no, leave it as that. So.
After a day in Santiago, I decided to hike on to Finisterre, which is also called Fistera in Spanish. My Italian friend, student friend, Vittorio, spent about a day and a half hiking with me on the way to Finisterre. And C is a beautiful small city in a magnificent setting, not far from Finisterre. I just can't, believe how, how wonderful it is just walking along like that. And
This is the holy man that I was telling you about. Isn't that an impressive costume? So this young man dressed in the blue and the white, I think he was perhaps the guide. So he was the one who permitted me to take a picture, but absolutely, I was not to go any closer nor to ask any questions. But this, as I said, was getting off the bus in the town of Finisterre, where Dora and I spent a few days just ambling around. I thought that was really quite beautiful. I'd like to know so much more. As I said, we didn't take the bus, but here we are. This is a pilgrim just very near to the end of the ocean's edge. One of the rare female sculpture of a rare female pilgrim. Did you want to say?
Well, the Finisterre itself is several kilometers away from where the lighthouse is, which is really the end of the world, because the ships, well, maybe, as you can imagine. So you have to walk the 3 kilometers from Finisterre to get to the lighthouse, which is something worth seeing. And that's what Germaine was doing. This is the lighthouse at Finisterre. This signpost overlooking the ocean says, "May peace prevail the earth," in Galician, which is spoken by about 2.4 million people in the local area. This Christian monument is together with a fire site, and many people come and have fires and bonfires, picnics, and so on the. It seems to be very popular among the local people. Some pretty challenging waves out on the Atlantic. And the view from the lighthouse. There's Germaine and Ron at the end of the world.
I think the picture says it all.
Okay. And here's Ron at what is apparently the well-known, even notorious boot at Finisterre. And on our final slide, I'd like to note that Tom and Mary were married in December 2014, 3 months after our time in Spain. So there's love on the Camino. Okay, so I have a few comments. Okay, so I've been to Spain to walk the Camino 3 times. In 2014, when I went with Tom Brown and Mary Mullen. In 2015, when I went with my son to walk half the Camino Francis, as we were limited to his available holidays. And in 2019, when I went by myself to satisfy my historical and archaeological curiosity by exploring some museums, caves, and archaeological sites that are unique to Spain and Portugal, as well as to walk the spectacular part of the spectacularly beautiful Camino Norte. The obvious question arises, why walk the Camino? My friend Bob likes to travel to various seminars to meditate. Is that spiritual? I think it's much the same for me to walk on the Camino. It's partly the people that you meet and the places that you see, but a big part is the time I spent by myself, particularly the walking, and sometimes in something of a state of contemplation. It's an experience I realize when I'm on the Camino, but I don't get the same thing walking around Toronto or Scarborough, or even on the Bruce Trail. In Spain, I don't have to drive to the day's start point. I don't have to arrange for someone to pick me up when I decide to stop at the end of the day. I spent no time whatsoever in a car at any time during the 7 weeks I was in Spain in 2014. But it's not just leisure, like a cruise. I have a job. I have to walk about 25 kilometers every day. Well, most days. So it works for me in a lot of ways. As Germaine said, I simply wanted to experience time away from everything, our modern society. It's been said that humans are born to walk. For untold millennia, in places like Atapuerca and the caves at El Castillo, Las Monedas, and Altamira, small groups of hunter-gatherers would walk for tens, if not hundreds of kilometers as they tracked down game that they needed to hunt in order to survive. And their brains and their bodies changed over time as they traveled, walking. So maybe spending days on the Camino can stimulate activity in our limbic system, the old part of our brains that controls our basic functions that our current lifestyle doesn't exercise. What's the result? Seems to me it's different strokes for different folks. On the first evening of my journey to Finisterre, I met a 60-year-old man from Washington State. He said he was there to work out his relationship with God in the context of a legal battle. He and the corporation he owned objected to paying for abortions for his employees. Of course, in the USA, healthcare is provided through one's employer. I found it interesting that he considered that it's his money and they are his employees, and that the issue of abortion is or should be his to decide, reminding me of Georgia in the 1800s. I met him again on the Camino the following day at the albergue in the evening, reminding me, in both cases, accompanied by an attractive French woman. Had he come to terms with God after a month on the Camino, perhaps with an intervention from St. James? I don't know. Although I disagree with him profoundly on abortion, healthcare, and many other issues, I suspect that he was just as comfortable with his God and just as happy with his Camino as I was with mine. He did, after all, do the walking when Camino.